Today we're talking about a $20 billion bet. A bet so audacious it wasn't just about building a factory. It was about challenging a global economic order and, in the process, completely changing a continent's future.
But to really get why this was such a monumental achievement, you first have to wrap your head around the paradox at the center of it all. It's a real head-scratcher, right? How can a nation that is literally floating on an ocean of black gold find itself constantly and desperately running on empty?
For 3 decades, 30 years, this was the absolutely insane reality in Nigeria. We're talking about Africa's #1 oil producer, yet you couldn't reliably fuel your own car. Every single day, they'd ship their raw crude oil out, only to turn around and spend billions of dollars importing expensive, refined gasoline back in. It was a cycle of dependency that made absolutely no sense.
And that's what we're calling Africa's oil paradox. It's a situation so completely absurd, it's like watching a nation starve to death while holding a loaf of bread. It was nothing short of an economic suicide mission, and for decades, nobody could figure out how to stop it.
And the consequences of this were just crippling. Endless lines at gas stations became a normal part of daily life. Billions of dollars that should have been building schools and hospitals were just vaporized, spent buying back their own resource at a premium. Economic growth? Totally choked off. The nation was literally bleeding wealth.
So this problem seemed permanent, right? Unsolvable. That is, until one man, Africa's richest, Aliko Dangote, decided he was going to be the one to solve it. He placed a bet so enormous it could either save his entire country or completely and utterly ruin her.
Let this number just sink in for a second. $20 billion. That was the wager. Pretty much his entire personal fortune, all pushed into the middle of the table on a single monumental idea.
And here's what that money was for: to build a refinery that could process 650,000 barrels of oil every single day. Now, that's enough to supply 100% of Nigeria's needs with a huge surplus left over to export.
And this is what that gamble looks like. You can't even call it a factory. This is the Dangote Refinery, the largest single-train refinery on planet Earth, a true industrial monster.
The sheer scale of it is just staggering. The complex is bigger than Victoria Island in Lagos. It has its own power plant, one that's powerful enough to light up a small country. Oh, and its own deep-sea port. This wasn't just a refinery, it was a completely self-contained industrial city.
But you know what? Building this thing was only half the battle. On paper, it was a perfect plan. In reality, it turned into a decade-long nightmare because the fight was about to shift from engineering challenges to something much, much more dangerous.
And you've got to understand this key point. When your project threatens to completely disrupt a multi-billion-dollar global trade, you don't just fight with concrete and steel. You end up fighting geopolitical enemies who want nothing more than to see you fail. And these were the main enemies. For decades, a network of European refineries had made an absolute fortune selling refined fuel to West Africa. Dangote's project wasn't just a little competition. No, it was an existential threat. It was designed to cut them out of the game completely.
Then, all of a sudden, the project was hit by a wave of really bad luck. Mysterious delays started plaguing construction. International funding suddenly started to dry up, and then wham, the Nigerian currency crashed, doubling the cost of all the imported equipment overnight. To anyone on the outside, it looked like this thing was doomed.
But against all odds, by 2024, he did it. The beast was finally built. A $20 billion miracle of engineering was standing there, ready to go. But it had one huge problem. It was starving for crude oil.
And this is where the story goes from unbelievable to just flat-out absurd. This was the final act of sabotage. The refinery needed Nigerian oil, but the international oil companies drilling that very oil in Nigeria refused to sell it to him. They actually preferred to ship it thousands of miles away to their own refineries in Europe. So in a sickening, twisted irony, Dangote was forced to start importing crude oil from America to power his Nigerian refinery.
So at this point, the story pivots. This isn't just a business deal anymore. It's an all-out power struggle. Dangote wasn't just fighting for his company now. He was fighting for the economic sovereignty of his country.
Well, after months of public pressure and intense backroom battles, the government finally stepped in. The economic blockade was about to be broken by force. The international players were told in no uncertain terms, you have to sell.
And this was the weapon that changed the entire game, the Nigerian Mandate. It was a new government rule, and it was simple. If you are drilling for oil in our country, you supply our local refineries first, before a single barrel gets exported. And just like that, the entire power dynamic flipped on its head.
And with that, the war was won. In 2024, the engines finally roared to life. The first trucks of diesel and aviation fuel rolled out of those gates, signaling the beginning of a brand new era.
That $20 billion gamble? It paid off. I mean, just look at this shift. Nigeria is transforming from a nation that was begging for fuel imports into an energy powerhouse, totally self-sufficient and ready to start exporting to its neighbors.
But this victory, you have to understand, was so much bigger than just one company or even one country. This was about rewriting the economic map of the entire African continent.
And this is the ultimate takeaway here. Aliko Dangote proves something absolutely fundamental, that Africa doesn't just have to be a source of raw materials for the rest of the world. It has the capacity, it has the will, and it has the power to process its own resources, control its own industries, and profit from its own wealth.
It was a win against all the odds, against the powerful critics, and against the weight of history itself. And it leaves us with one critical question for the future. What happens when an entire continent stops just exporting raw resources and starts exporting finished power?
The world is about to find out. For more stories of the empires being built today and the visionaries behind them, make sure you subscribe to Venture Archives.